Hey everyone, this is Stephen Judge, clinical naturopath and nutritionist in Sydney, Australia. If you're watching this replay, let's make it interactive. Please say hi in the comments below. Let me know if you have any insights or questions about what I'm talking about today. Let me know how you're feeling about what I'm saying. I'm always happy to get back to anyone who has any burning questions about what I'm talking about. So I wanted to continue on with the theme from my last video, which looked at the relationship between estrogen and copper and how having excess copper levels can drive symptoms related to excess estrogen, such as heavy and painful periods. This can manifest in some people as anxiety, as copper increases estrogen levels in the body. And I touched on how basically if you don't treat one of these core organic underlying causes, you won't correct the issue. So the excess copper was a great point to highlight in relation to treating the underlying cause of these issues. But like any sort of health condition or concern, it's not just one thing, although that is an important thing. It's usually multifactorial. And so one of the other major underlying factors I wanted to highlight today that is linked to having excess estrogen related issues and hormonal imbalances, which you must look at balancing and correcting, is to restore, rebalance, and correct the state of your gut microbiome. We want to get to the root cause of underlying hormonal imbalance because, if we're not getting to the root cause of the issue in regards to the gut, again, we could address the zinc and the copper issue, but if our gut flora is imbalanced and we're not properly metabolizing and then excreting estrogen, we're still going to get a flare-up of symptoms. So, we want to get to the root cause of why you have anxiety or PMS or fibroids, endometriosis, IBS in the first place. We don't want to just manage it. We want to get to the root cause so that you're, free of these burden of symptoms. So if we're addressing excess copper, that's fantastic. But if our gut flora is imbalanced, we're going to be reabsorbing hormones whilst not effectively excreting toxins by the liver and the bowels. And you're just going to have persisting hormonal imbalances. So it's interesting is many people, practitioners and clients know that liver detoxification is super important for metabolizing estrogens into their correct form and preparing them for elimination. So there's lots of fantastic herbal medicines and nutrients out there that are required for proper liver detoxification, such as broccoli sprout extracts, dim is another one, St. Mary's thistle, turmeric, schizandra are some herbal medicines. So these are all really useful for estrogen-dependent conditions. But if you're supporting the liver, but then you reach the bowel or the large intestine and you have dysbiosis or an imbalance of the good and bad bugs in the gut, and you're not properly eliminating and metabolizing these estrogens, you're not getting to the core of the issue. So I came across this term called the ESTROBOLOME. ESTROBOLOME, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I only discovered it a few days ago. But it's basically referring to the grouping of specific bacterial genes that are capable of metabolizing estrogen effectively. So it's the genes within these specific bacteria which are able to switch on or express themselves and effectively create the enzymes that are responsible for metabolizing estrogens within the human intestine, or more specifically, the large intestine or the colon. So we know, for example, that there is an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. Now, beta-glucuronidase is typically produced in very high levels when there is an imbalance of bad bacteria in the gut. So what happens is this enzyme beta-glucuronidase, it prevents the proper detoxification of estrogen from the bowels and causes it to be reabsorbed and then circulated back throughout your system, which we don't want to happen because this then drives the symptoms of excess estrogen, drives a lot of inflammation. and heavy periods and painful periods, for example. And it keeps copper levels up too, and progesterone levels down. And so, because we're not getting to the core of the issue. So this is one of the most well-known links that, causes a lot of these symptoms, this excess beta-glucuronidase caused by the imbalance of good and bad bugs in the gut. There's a professor from New York University who very recently, there's been research published that she was looking specifically into the relationship between estrogen circulation and how the gut bacteria in our microbiome can affect the risk of breast cancer. And her team wrote a paper that basically observed it's entirely plausible that the estrogen microbiome axis could contribute to the risk of hormone dependent cancers such as breast cancer, because there's this imbalance in the gut and estrogens aren't being properly metabolized and excreted from the body and are then driving excess estrogen symptom picture. And then down the track leading to more serious conditions such as fibroids or endometriosis or some sort of estrogen-dependent cancer. And they conclude that using targeted prebiotic and probiotic interventions could be used specifically to target the bacterial species in the gut and effectively decrease the estrogen-related cancer risks. This is amazing research, especially naturopathic medicine has proclaimed for a long time that, gut health is imperative for all layers of our health. And thousands of years ago, TCM and Ayurveda have said all disease begins in the gut. So it's one of these really cool pieces of research that's, starting to become mainstream and validate even these like ancient concepts. So when we look at any condition related to excess estrogen, be it cancer, fibroids, PMS, endometriosis, although that has some immune influence as well, we need to address whether or not you're metabolizing and excreting estrogen properly. And then we need to use these interventions because you can take supplements for anti-inflammatory pain relief, that's herbal or pharmaceutical, or for boosting levels of other hormones such as progesterone. You can take magnesium for the relief of symptoms and for fatigue and nervous system support, whatever, like they're all really useful. But if we don't target the health and the state of our gut microbiome, we're not getting to the core, one of the core underlying drivers. So, a popular supplement used by practitioners and clients is something called calcium D-glucarate. So calcium D-glucarate is a chemical derived from sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is a chemical that comes from broccoli sprout extract. Broccoli sprout extract is awesome. It's a really super powerful, it's a plant that has super powerful antioxidant actions and kind of upregulates our own antioxidant mechanisms in the body. It's an awesome anti-inflammatory plant as well. So, but anyway, the calcium D-glucarate comes from this plant. And so calcium D-glucarate isolated on its own is a supplement used for estrogen excretion and detoxification by reducing levels of beta-glucuronidase. And so therefore they're excreted properly. This is great. I've used it with clients, particularly where there's clearly a gut issue. I guess it's a nice short-term, for me, I think it's a nice short-term intervention to, okay, there's potentially excess beta-glucuronidase driving excess estrogen, so let's take some calcium D-glucarate while we target restoring the gut microbiome, which is a bit more of a short and longer term treatment goal. But you can't just use calcium D-glucarate on its own and not address an imbalance of your gut microflora, because that's essentially still a band-aid approach, in my opinion. So what are my top tips for addressing the state of your gut microbiome in this context? I'm going to keep it really simple here. If you have excess estrogen-related symptoms, the core of it is you are going to need to modify your diet. and ensure you are consuming specific foods such as plenty of fresh fruit and vegetables, especially prebiotic and resistant starch-rich foods. So some really common ones here are cooked and then cooled potatoes. It changes the composition of the starch when it's cooled and feeds your beneficial gut flora. This is perfect for really sensitive people as well. Lentils and beans, so legumes, are very prebiotic and resistant starch rich, as are some vegetables such as broccoli and beetroot. If you can break them down, prebiotic rich foods are essential in the long term for feeding the beneficial microflora in your gut and allowing them to proliferate. So most women will see a dramatic improvement in their digestive and hormonal symptoms if they focus on these kinds of foods. Also, if they get rid of gluten and dairy from their diet, or in the case for dairy, at least get rid of cow's milk. These are extremely irritating to the gut, these foods, and simply, you know, you can take supplements, but even just simply removing these will drastically shift the ecosystem of your gut microbiome. A few other key ones are freshly ground flax seeds or flax meal. So flax meal, especially if you grind them fresh, if you just buy like a cheap coffee grinder, they possess these plant lipids which are really effective at binding excess estrogens in the bowel and then eliminating them from the bowel. Ground flax is also quite mucilaginous. It's very soothing and anti-inflammatory to the gut. So this is a really nice, super easy, super cheap intervention that women can get onto. And also just looking at having a balance of the correct dietary fats. So gut microflora do thrive in an environment where people are getting the right amounts of omega-3 in their diet, so which we know come from fatty fish or ground flaxseed, like I just mentioned, or flaxseed oil. Some people prefer to rely on algae-based supplements if they don't eat fish or seafood, as omega-3 is much harder to get in the diet than other fats, such as omega-6 and saturated fats. Targeted prebiotic supplements, I do recommend people get onto ASAP as a key intervention that is super cheap and really convenient. One of them is called partially hydrolyzed guar gum. I'll drop a link for that below in the comments at the end of this video, where to buy that. You just grab it online. It's a very specific prebiotic. So, I mean, prebiotics aren't just any kind of fiber. Prebiotics have to technically selectively feed gut bacteria in the bowel and allow them to proliferate or regrow. So probiotics are another really great intervention, particularly in the short term, for addressing imbalance of gut flora, potentially driving estrogen-related symptoms. But probiotics technically don't re-inoculate the bowel. They don't allow you to proliferate and grow new bacteria. I guess people think you take a probiotic and they stay in the gut and you've got new gut bacteria. That's not how they work. The key for allowing that to happen and in the long term restoring the balance of bugs in your gut is the prebiotic foods and then targeted prebiotic supplements. So another really cool prebiotic supplement is galacto-oligosaccharides, or GOS for short. Another one is called inulin, which if you're interested in GOS or inulin, it's nice to get a variety of all these prebiotic supplements at some point. Your practitioner can point you in the right direction to buy these, or please just drop me a comment or a question about how to go about that in the comments. But depending on the person, you know, I usually suggest partially hydrolyzed guar gum first, kind of across the board, just because it's a very specific one, and it's if you're prone to chronic bloating and you react to prebiotic foods, even the prebiotic supplements can be gas forming if you're sensitive and have a lot of dysbiosis going on in the gut. So I also highly recommend, for those of you who really want to know what's going on in the gut on a much deeper level, I'm using a stool test for a lot of my clients. It goes by the name of Ubiome. So there's lots of different stool tests out there. Some of them are more accurate than others. Some of them are more relevant. It really depends what you're looking for. Some of them are a lot more expensive. You can get into the like $700-800 mark for some of these tests. But a really cool one that's cost effective and gives some of the most accurate and insightful information is a test by a company called Ubiome. Now, I've been doing a lot of specific training in my field to be able to analyze tests done by Ubiome, and these Ubiome basically give the most accurate clinical picture of the state of the beneficial and not so beneficial bugs, in your gut. And also it gives an indication of how diverse they are. I don't think any other companies assess your gut flora on that level. So it not only identifies what strains are there, but they really accurately are able to say how diverse they are in the gut, at what levels are they in there. And so when we get a bit deeper into looking at these levels of the different bacterial species in your gut, it can give us an insight into, okay, so depending on, you know, the levels of the many different species, what could be happening in the ecosystem of your gut, and then potentially driving symptoms related to estrogen excess or other things. So for example, I have a client who I got their test results back a few days ago, and they have extremely high levels of some bacterial species which are referred to as gram-negative bacteria. So gram-negative bacteria are what in their cell wall, when there's too many of these bacteria in the gut, they secrete an endotoxin called LPS, or lipopolysaccharide. And so when lipopolysaccharide is absorbed into the bloodstream because of a permeable gut wall or leaky gut, which is another end result of having imbalanced bacteria, this can drive a lot of inflammation in the body. You know, any kind of inflammatory condition, whether it's hormonal imbalance, mental health. So when we get these insights with the stool testing and, you know, look at all the other species, we can go right and we can very specifically target which prebiotics and which plant chemicals from specific plants, so flavonoids, which ones this person specifically needs to completely shift the environment in their gut microbiome. So I think this test, it costs about 120 Australian dollars. It can take between 1 to maybe 3 months if they're really busy to get the results. So my biggest advice would be to get onto this straight away. I can drop another link to send you over to that website to have a look at the test. And yeah, let me know if you want to look a bit deeper into the Ubiome stool testing, because it's the best things you can do, not just for, you know, the state of your hormonal health if you have excess estrogen symptoms and know that you need to look at your gut health, but for your health in general. I mean, you know, it's so mainstream now, the amount of knowledge we have about how important our gut health is and the state of our microbiome, and this test is proving extremely useful and insightful for many of my clients, and that's really exciting. So, you know, if you don't want to be plagued with excess estrogen symptoms and driven conditions, if it's, you know, if you know, or it sounds like you might be one of these people who have hormonal imbalances that's potentially being driven by the gut, just take note of what I've mentioned in this video today. And yeah, consider getting really specific and highly targeted with your approach to treating your gut and rebalancing your gut microbiome. So thanks for joining, and I'll chat to you soon. Okay, bye.